Land is there, buildings are there, money is there, therefore it's ideally located, situated for starting a university. The committee recommended this. 3 days later, Mr. Rajsekhar Reddy announced in the assembly, the committee unanimously recommended Rajahmundry as the ideal place for locating the university. This is off the record. I'm just mentioning it. Anyway, that happened because of political factors. Now the result is today, the moment you make somebody vice chancellor, what happens is you give him 25 lakhs and the vice chancellor buys a new car, the registrar buys a new car, a flag is there. Of course, light is not there because light is not going to be seen right by many. And so Rajahmundry University, Adhikavi Nanna University vice chancellors, take from the beginning, everybody for 3 years, everybody is in search of a piece of land. And that piece of land is elusive. They're not getting it. University is a non-starter. Now, at that time, I suggested to the university vice chancellor, please ensure one small thing. Develop literacy in your 2 districts. If only this 7 years that has been done, the literacy of Andhra Pradesh would have touched 1995 by now. Because universities have no other work there. Mr. Prabhakar Rao will forgive me because he was vice chancellor of a better university, better established university. Therefore, the vice chancellors were unable to do anything because of lack of funds, etc., etc. That is where he says, development is not a kind of a particular module to be presented, fixated, and implemented. Here, a wonderful example is given. I mentioned this in a different context. There is an institute in Delhi, in London called Survival International. Look at this beautiful name, Survival International. It is an institute headed by Stephen Corey. He wrote in December 2011 an article in which he said, 150 million tribal people of the world are being turned into dispossessed paupers. What is development for? That's the title of the paper. Dams and mines. The moment you say dams and mines especially, in the Indian context, it is a very explosive subject when you say mines. Dams and mines, I'm quoting him. I'm sure the opposition headed by Mr. Jaitley, I heard Mr. Jaitley the other day in a TV interview for 1 hour, Barkha Dutt interviewed him. Very rarely I watch television, but that was one very interesting TV. And normally I am not very fond of any of the Indian parliamentarians because both Mr. Jaitley and Ms. Sushma Swaraj, they raise their voice and they become unlistenable often. But that day, Mr. Jaitley was very sober, very brilliant, very articulate. He said, we are doing it because the elections are coming. He said, because the Congress is got in a very tricky situation, we are going to exploit it. And look at his logic. By disrupting Parliament, Barkha Dutt asked, why are you disrupting Parliament? By disrupting Parliament, we are going to save the nation. Nation is more important than Parliament. Wonderful logic, isn't it? And that is, Mr. Jaitley is a lawyer. Mr. Jaitley is a lawyer. Now therefore, please remember, what is development for? Dams and mines. I'm sure Jaitley would like this sentence. Dams and mines are invariably meant to enrich the elites while impoverishing the locals. Meant to enrich the elites while impoverishing locals. Development is leading to displacing and dispossessing poor people. This is what Arundhati Roy, this is what that other lady, so many others, Ella Bhatt and others, they all take it up and then they do satyagrahas and things like this. But at the same time, I don't accept the point of view that whatever project is coming up, we must oppose it, we must throw it out, that's not the way. Anyway, that's a different thing. Therefore, the flaws in the Indian system, according to experts, is that the gap between the haves and the have-nots is alarmingly widening. Endemic corruption, incompetent administration, these are rampant all over the country. Clear policies are not there, and if the policies are laid down, they are not being adhered to. And then the last criticism made by Mark Tully against civil servants, in continuation of what Mathur and Berkman said. In India, a new ethos is to be created. The government department must function without treating themselves as relics of the Raj. Civil servants in India think that they're relics of the Raj. They must remember that they must be both civil and also service-minded. That is why they are called civil servants. Now, these are the points made in this. I am coming to the last part of it with a question about my own choice of the subject. I said, what is meant by political culture? Can we arrive at a consensus? I drew your kind attention in my last lecture to a very brilliant document released by 8 intellectuals, Non-Alignment 2. I brought the document also, Non-Alignment 2, by very eminent people. One professor in London, leading political scientist, one professor Delhi, and 2 professors from Calcutta, and the editor-in-chief of the Hindu, Siddharth Varadarajan. 8 of them, they prepared a document called Non-Alignment 2. This is a thought-provoking document. It must be discussed. And probably if you want it, we will definitely have a discussion on that. Basically about foreign policy. In that conclusion, 2 very important points are made which describe the essence of political culture I was struggling to describe in the last 4 lectures. The essence of political culture is, they define, commitment to liberal, secular and constitutional values. Culture is different from political culture. Mr. Gujral, as Prime Minister, said, India is adjusting to coalition politics. India is not adjusting to coalition culture. Coalition culture means political culture. What is that political culture? That political culture means commitment to liberal, secular and constitutional values. And then these 8 gentlemen, somebody said, only gentlemen are there, there is no lady in this. That is the biggest defect of this committee. Somebody commented upon it. Criticism has to be made against, isn't it? These people, finally they said, 8 gentlemen, there is a higher value system. There is a higher culture. The highest human and universal values as shaped by Gandhi, Tagore, Nehru and Ambedkar. These values, they call them universalist values, human values of the highest order. That is political culture. That calls for moral and ideological leadership. What is moral and ideological leadership? Esteemed friends, I once brought your kind attention the famous definition of communication by Laswell. Communication is who says what to whom with what effect. Very simple definition. Leadership also is brilliantly defined. Leadership is who is leading whom from where to where. This is a beautiful definition. Leadership is whether it is NSTL or whether it is Andhra University or whether it is a Vice Chancellor or a Chief Minister or anybody. Leadership is who is leading whom from where to where. This is leadership. In India, leadership is missing at both state and national levels. That's the biggest problem. Therefore, please remember, India urgently needs to recapture. Look at the interesting situation. In 2012, we are asking the people to return to 1947, 1948. Who are the 4 molders of the culture? The 4 molders are Gandhi, Tagore, Ambedkar and Nehru. Very surprisingly, a television channel may say the greatest Indian, etc., etc., etc. But then these eminent authors have come to the conclusion the highest value system that India can really think of for survival and for success is the value system shaped and nurtured by Rabindranath Tagore, Mahatma Gandhi, Jawaharlal Nehru and B.R. Ambedkar. This is what they say. The last part of the point, and I shall be done. This is where I want you. Now, what is the point in having this exercise? Dr. Vijay Kumar, Sri Rangarajan, and Srinivas and others have very kindly organized this. Thank you, Vijay, once again. There is a point I thought, more than informing the students, my job is that of a postman, gathering information, and not like the Indian Postal Service, which has declined because of competition from courier service. My job is that of a postman, gathering these nuggets of wisdom from various sources and sharing them with you, not more than that. But a more challenging thing is there. That challenging thing is, this man who talked about demographic dividend gives a very stern, clear warning. He says India will be the country to watch in 2020. Mr. Kalam said, when will corruption end? By 2020. Why is that 2020? All the old fellows will go away and the younger generation will take over. Because all this muck will be out. The younger generation will take over. Wonderful. Everywhere there is demand for young leadership, youthful leadership, etc., etc. Now he gives us a warning which is very important, which in my opinion, something has to be done by all of us. That warning is, if the younger generation, if the people belonging to the 15-20 age group are not properly trained, it will be a cataclysm for India. It will be a disaster for India. Because he says 500 million people will be in need of employment and training. They may take to violence, they may join extremist movement, they may be in possession of technology and weapons which will be very dangerous for survival of the country itself. That is why he says India's power is undoubtedly there, the power is undoubtedly recognized, the power of the youth, the power of technology, the power of software, and the power of our youth, younger generation. But today he says, unless you give vocational training, how does he identify it? He says, in his opinion, universities, if they don't work, it's okay. Because the IITs are doing the job. Higher level education is okay. Youngsters are doing well on their own, online, connectivity, etc., etc. But there's a more important thing he says. That more important thing is, educational system is very weak at the lower level, at the secondary level, at the school level, at the +2 level. It is very weak, he says, education. Now, what does he mean by this? I think this is 100% true. The people in the age group of 12 and 20, they are not receiving the education and guidance that they need. That is where only in this hall, I think yesterday or day before, Dr. Vijay Kumar organized a lecture by a very wonderfully talented and committed teacher who was talking about the younger generation's drift in wrong direction. The same thing is warned here in this article. It will be a cataclysm. What do you mean by this? Education ultimately is a combination of three things we know. It is a combination of what? Number 1, knowledge. Number 2, skill. Number 3, values. But these values are more important than skill and knowledge. Skill and knowledge can be acquired, but values are not easily imbibed or not properly imparted. On the eve of Teachers' Day, this is a very important warning to all teachers. That teachers must, that is why Kalam is absolutely right when he says the home and the school must come together. Esteemed elders, I request you to devise, especially Dr. Vijay Kumar, because he is one person who translates ideas into action. Can we really do something for the benefit of younger generation? As Isaiah Berlin said, you are not going to change the entire younger generation, but let there be some torchbearers in the younger generation. Those who can hold aloft these values, the values that we have talked about, commitment to secular, democratic, constitutional values politically, commitment to knowledge, skill, and values academically, and commitment to the very important goal. Though Mr. Shashi Tharoor said our below poverty level that has come down from 90 to 30 in the last 65 years, it's still a matter of shame. Mr. Tharoor was only giving the percentage. You will agree with me, percentage might have come down from 90 to 30 below poverty level line people. Wonderful. But what about the population? Population has increased. That is why the tragedy is, if Mr. Tharoor is very proud that only 30% of the population are below poverty line, we are very unhappy that the 30% of the people below poverty line constitute the population in numbers 33 crores, as many as there were at the time of independence. That means India's independence is without meaning. Independent India is free, but not equal, but not at all the India that Gandhiji wanted it to become. This is a matter of great concern to us. Therefore, I thought, let this be a small think tank, and Vizag should start think tanks. I'm not talking about this organization. The biggest challenge to all of us is, in the 21st century, as he rightly said, people must somehow devise means. Only this morning, some elder came to me and said, he is very unhappy because his sons are revolting. And it seems the son said to the parents, "Evaru kosam chestava nuvu?" And the father was shocked. He never had such an idea when he was studying. He was shocked. He was out of his wits. And somebody said, this is the way youngsters think. Because what happened to American society before 9/11? They did not see war, they did not see poverty, they did not see difficulty, and the American youngsters got addicted to drugs. Because they never saw anything bad, anything. Only 9/11 shook them out of complacency. In India today, that kind of situation is arising, at least in urban areas. That is why, a very important point, and I shall close in 2 minutes. Now, the government today must play the role, for instance, in 3 ways. It must regulate and control private enterprise. The partnership between state and business must be only for the benefit of the people. Business, public, private synergy must help in the elimination of poverty. The 3 important actors today are state, market, and society. And Arundhati Roy, talking about elections, she said, the biggest problem with India is our electoral system. And she wrote such a beautiful line. I think somewhere she said, writing on elections is as scientific, as much a science as the science of sorcery, she said. Sorcery and witchcraft. Sorcery and witchcraft, look at the metaphor. She is comparing Indian political situation, electoral situation with sorcery. That means all kinds of manipulation, all kinds of witchcraft, all kinds of corruption enter into system. That is why today 32% of seats, votes you get 70% of the seats. The other day, Pranay Rao was making a point on television. He says, across the country, parties that get 5% of the votes will not get any seats. But parties that get 7% or 8% of the vote will get 30-40% of the seats. That means a Bihar, an Andhra Pradesh or an Uttar Pradesh can really flood the parliament with 2/3 or 1/3, at least 1/3 of the seats, by simply manipulating the electoral vote bank. This is what is called manipulation of electoral vote bank. I am not going into that. Therefore, our biggest deficits are, number 1, deficit in budget. Number 2, deficit in trade. Number 3, deficit in credibility. Number 4, deficit in legitimacy. Number 5, deficit in trust. Trust in everything. We don't trust anybody. There is no trust between individuals. There is no trust between government and society. Therefore, in this situation, that is why I close with a very famous quotation of Plato, who said, in the first lecture I said, why should we analyze politics? Politics is dirty. I gave the wonderful example given by Professor Dahl. Everybody must analyze politics, explain politics. Though in politics there is a sutra. That sutra is analyze and explain, but don't predict. For 3 reasons they said. 3 reasons. Number 1, to understand the world around us better. Who is the new collector? Who is the new commissioner? Who is the new etc., etc. When are elections going to be held in Vizag? To know the world around us better. Number 2, to make more intelligent choices. You have to choose. Politics is choosing. Politics is nothing but bargaining. Number 3, a very important thing, to bring about change, big or small, in one person or one place. That's the role of every human being. That's what he said. Now, in that context, Plato very famously said long ago, the heaviest penalty for declining to engage in politics. If you don't like politics, if you call politics dirty, if you don't participate in voting, etc., the heaviest penalty for declining to engage in politics is to be ruled by someone inferior to you. This is the case the world over. Wherever decent persons of intelligence, persons of moral fiber have shunned politics. That is why politics should not be shunned. Discussion should not be avoided. Debate should not be abhorred. People must participate. All this is called public discourse. As part of the public discourse, this is a responsibility given to me. I am grateful to Dr. Vijay Kumar, Sri Rangarajan, and finally, my habit of conveying to you what I have learned recently. At NSTL, I mentioned 3 E's. We are in an age living in entertainment, excitement, and exhaustion. On 8th, if there is no rain, there will be entertainment, there will be excitement, there will be exhaustion at Vizag Cricket Stadium when New Zealand and India play a 2020 match, isn't it? Every day in my house, my wife watches Gemini serial except on Saturday and Sunday, and entertainment, excitement, and exhaustion, and no cup of Horlicks for me. And this is what is happening everywhere. And at NSTL, I also said we are living in an age of triple T's. Time is very short for everybody, management of time. Technology is very arrogant. As somebody said, technology is arrogant and intrusive. Mr. Subramaniam was helping the cameraman, take care of your technology. It is arrogant and intrusive. And therefore, time, technology, and lastly, tension. I repeat, there is no human being without health problem. There is no family without a problem. There is no human being without an ailment. And there is no organization without tension. The last important point, culture means 3 C's. Culture means, as Andhra Patel rightly said, as de Tocqueville wrote, culture means in India, one mistake we have been doing is giving too much of importance to authority, laws, and constitution. Political culture depends upon conventions, customs, and civility. Triple C. That is culture. Culture is a triple C. Customs and conventions. Customs and conventions. Tell me how American Constitution functioned so well till the time of Roosevelt. Convention. The president will not be in office for more than 2 terms. Who set the convention? George Washington. Tell me how in England the prime minister and the opposition leader function. Conventions. Tell me how the healthiest democracy in the world, Switzerland, functions. Convention. 5:3:1. 5 to German-speaking cantons, 3 to French-speaking cantons, 1 to Italian-speaking cantons. Conventions. I suggested this. I even represented to the Sri Krishna Commission. If only Andhra Pradesh in 1956, instead of 6-point formula, gentleman's agreement and all that, one simple convention. 5 years means 60 months, isn't it? 20 months, one from Telangana. 20 months, one from Rayalaseema. 20 months, one from Andhra. Chief Minister. Finished. And then 2 deputy chief ministers. Let them also by rotation. And who will say my area is neglected? Nobody will say that. So politics, please remember, as Andhra Patel very rightly said, conventions are more important, sometimes customs are more important than laws. We are depending too much on laws, with the result that the Supreme Court is overburdened, and the result is Indian democracy is overloaded and overheated. Thank you very much for the opportunity.